Hello and welcome to Exploring Entrepreneurship. Let's get giggy. My name is Kelsey Hitchingham and I'm delighted to be your moderator today. I'm an Austin Young Chamber board member and I'm also the founder and executive director of the Hitchingham Group, a nonprofit management consulting company. I also host the podcast Engaging Austin, focusing on nonprofits and civic engagement in Austin. Exploring Entrepreneurship is a partnership between the City of Austin's Small Business Program and the Austin Young Chamber of Commerce. The Austin Young Chamber is pleased to be able to work with the City of Austin to bring forward several programs that support early stage startups and small businesses. The Young Chamber runs many programs through the year that promote business and talent development, entrepreneurship, civic engagement, and community growth. Since the pandemic started in March, the Austin Young Chamber has continued to offer programming virtually with over 35 programs in the past 6 months. Please keep an eye on the Austin Young Chamber website and social channels for more information about upcoming programs, pitch competitions, and business topics. We are very excited about today's discussion because even before the pandemic, the gig economy was taking off in Austin. Now, while things have changed, we are seeing additional growth and pivots in this busy sector. Today's format will include a 45-minute panel with our expert panelists, followed by 30 minutes of roundtable discussions where you can dig deeper on topics, with your table moderator asking questions to the group and crowdsourcing answers. As we start the panel, if you have any questions for us, please drop them in the chat so we can answer questions at the end if we have time. So with that, let's get started. I'm going to introduce our panelists, starting with Shelby Stevens. Shelby is co-founder and CEO of Jolly, a Techstars-backed startup based in Austin. Jolly is a simple online tool that helps freelancers get more monthly repeat clients by instantly creating a personalized page where they can sell freelance services, even recurring subscription packages to their clients with zero commission fees. Shelby has been an entrepreneur for over a decade, working as a freelancer and also growing multiple businesses that rely on freelancers. Selena Zisman founded Doug Fresh Productions in 2015 with her husband as a resource for the creative community in Austin and beyond. Working alongside makers, musicians, and solopreneurs, DFP offers one-on-one consulting, workshops, event planning, and organizational tools which empower artists across disciplines with the information to establish, grow, and maintain their businesses. Zisman serves her community as a current member on the City of Austin's Arts Commission. And finally, Rachel Losh. Rachel joined Favor in 2018 to oversee the Texas-based on-demand delivery company's consumer apps and help implement iterative, agile product development methodologies. As Director of Product, she leads Favor's product team, spanning product management, product design, and product operations, and is responsible for the planning, delivery, and success of the company's product roadmap. So welcome, everybody, and thank you so much for joining our panel today.
Thanks, Nikki.
Thanks for having us.
Great. So let's jump right in. Each one of you represents a different sector in the gig economy. Can you share with us a little bit about what you're seeing in sector shifts from pre-pandemic to now? And Rachel, we'll start with you.
Sure. So really, within Favor, we've seen unprecedented demand on the on-demand delivery in the on-demand delivery space across really all of our user bases. And so for us, that is obviously customers, runners who are the gig economy workers who deliver favors, and our merchant partners, so restaurants in particular. And I'll say on the consumer side, we've seen just increased demand overall with our existing customer base as well as new customers, especially in like different populations that are more at risk for COVID. So we've seen a big spike in demand from seniors who are nervous about going out to restaurants, going grocery shopping. But we've also experienced a lot of additional demand and delivery services outside of our traditional customer base. We've also seen increased use of delivery services for restaurant prepared food, which is Favor's core business, but also increased use of delivery services for grocery and essential items as people have been less willing to go out and shop themselves. On the merchant side, pre-COVID, delivery used to increase incremental sales for restaurants. But with stay-at-home orders, dine-in restrictions, et cetera, during COVID, restaurants are now relying predominantly, if not solely, on delivery and takeout. And so interest and demand from restaurant partners and merchants has really increased. Also, like kind of different types of businesses. So typically our primary partners were restaurants and restaurant prepared food. They are still sort of our core, but we're now seeing retail businesses seeking out on-demand delivery options, especially with the upcoming holiday season and shopping coming like around the corner while COVID cases remain on the rise. And then finally, I'll just note that gig gig workers, who Favor calls runners, we've definitely seen a surge in demand for gig work opportunities. We've seen an increase in signups for Favor delivery drivers across the state. And generally, we think that's driven by people who have been furloughed or laid off from their job during the pandemic that haven't done gig work before. And so we're seeing runners who have come from corporate jobs to runners who have come from the restaurant industry. And we've also seen other gig workers who drive for the rideshare services. It's a decline in their business coming over to food delivery. And in general, runners and food delivery gig economy workers are now considered essential workers amid COVID. And then I'll just say that like the other major changes, like all industries, prioritization of health and safety measures is happening now more than ever. So for example, restaurants investing in tamper-resistant seals for go-to packaging. Virtually all of on-demand delivery services now, including Favor, have implemented contactless delivery, requiring orders to be left at the doorstep to keep both the runner and the customer safe. So we've definitely seen kind of changes in demand across all of our user bases, as well as changes that we've had to implement in our products to keep people safe.
Great. Thanks, Rachel. Selena, what are you seeing?
I think for creatives in particular, and I you mentioned work with musicians and visual artists who have always faced the challenge of being reliant on disposable income, right? We're not necessarily seen as people providing essential services or essential products. And so with COVID and the clampdown on income in general, people losing their jobs, it's taken a lot of flexibility on the creatives' part to really try and explore areas where they can generate income. There's been a lot of what I'm sure everybody has been seeing of live performances on Facebook, on Instagram, on Twitch. And so really leveraging these free and accessible platforms for you to be able to just present yourself. And that's for musicians as well as visual artists. It's all about opening up their space, bringing people behind the scenes and allowing them to connect with these artists in a more intimate way that sort of creates a relationship and encourages sales. So I think creatives have had to get even more creative with what they're having to do to garner attention, because now everybody's online. Everybody's sort of vying for the same eyes all at the same time. And so doing that while also saying, hey, I know everybody's got it tough right now, but if you can invest in small business, in us as a community, we're going to stick around and be able to help everybody thrive. So I think technology is something that's definitely been integrated into a regular practice, whereas before there's so much things, especially locally, markets and pop-ups and craft sales, and especially with the holiday season coming up. I mean, this is a very intense time of the year for most industries, but for creatives especially, because we rely on all of these in-person experiences to really cover our sales for this part of the year and going into the beginning of the year when January, February, things are notoriously really slow. So I think that's something that I've really seen is people just embracing technology on a much wider spectrum.
Thanks, Selena. And Shelby, what are you saying?
Yeah, sure. So first of all, at the beginning of the pandemic, my company had built up a network of about 40,000 gig workers, mostly in and around the events industry. So, bartenders, servers, audio video pros, a big long list of different types of professionals. And this network was really growing pretty fast. So we built some tools for businesses to tap into the network and really easily recruit and hire these workers. It was all totally free. And when the pandemic began, basically all this hiring activity just completely stopped, like almost overnight. This is similar with some other gig platforms that, unlike, for example, Favor, which is mostly food delivery, other on-demand apps like Instawork that were providing work opportunities to these same types of workers. Basically, all the demand for that type of labor just evaporated. And it was actually quite tragic. I mean, for the workers and for the businesses too. So that was obviously a massive shift caused by the pandemic, which really has not. I mean, it's kind of recovered a little bit, but not. It will eventually someday. But for our part, so that was one big shift. I think, we took a step back and said, okay, how can we build something different that will really help independent workers during this time? And so we shifted gears and built a new product, which is what you see on the Jolly website now. And we call this kind of the new Jolly. And it speaks to what I think is a pretty big sector shift that's happening now, which is around really taking control and ownership of your independent career. So basically, I think the last maybe 5 or so years of the gig economy has been dominated by this mindset that big marketplaces are the best solution for you if you're a worker. So you go and list your services and folks can find you. So this is like your Upworks, your Fivers, your Thumbtacks, and then the marketplace is going to take a cut of your earnings. And then, of course, you have the apps like your Ubers and such, which are basically doing the same thing, finding you some work, taking a cut. And I think the big shift that's begun and that you'll see accelerating is that workers will start to understand that there are tools and communities out there that can largely help them do this stuff on their own. And that over the long term, it's a lot better to put in that work and do that network building and marketing and do it on your own because you're not then dependent on a third party to give you work. So, build up your reputation, turn your skills into attractive service offerings, build up a client base and a business really without anyone taking a cut of your earnings. So at Jolly, we think this is a really important shift for the gig economy, so much so that we internally refer to it as a different thing. We call it the trust economy because it's a new reality where buyers and sellers of services are free to build trust directly with each other. And they don't have to depend on a third-party app or marketplace to do that for them. So that's kind of a big picture shift that we see happening.
Great, thank you. And I think, Shelby, you and Selena really sort of queued up the next question, which is that, we've been seeing that technology is becoming an increasingly important tool for gig businesses. Like gone are the days of putting up just flyers and saying, do you need this? Take a number. Marketing, meetings, payment, and e-commerce are all, becoming increasingly more technologically advanced. What are some of the ways that you've seen gig workers lean into adopting technology to support their gig business? And where have they had the most success? And Selena, I'm going to kick this to you first.
Yeah, I think shifting products overall to be something that's sort of a take and go, something that you can experience. I have a peer who was teaching classes in person and was really enjoying that one-on-one experience with her students. And that obviously was something that was shut down immediately. She was no longer to offer classes. And, we know through now 9 months of being on camera that, creating events that are live, it just makes it really difficult to participate, to see what's going on, especially if it's an educational system. So she's created a video series. That means that she took it upon herself to learn how to edit video, how to take video of quality, how to, she invested in gear and was able to create a box that she can ship that has all the supplies in it and a download link, and people can sort of enjoy these things at their leisure as opposed to needing to sign up for something, and if they miss it, right? So it's taken a lot of thinking outside the box and trying to think, how do I still make myself important and usable at this time? Yeah, I think people that have neglected their websites, have neglected their marketing and their social media have now needed to become experts overnight. And, either it's them teaching themselves or hiring professionals to come in and get feedback. But I think, it's a necessary part of being a business person today in general. But like I was saying before, with in-person opportunities to sell and create those relationships with customers and patrons, you were able to sort of skirt around it. And now at this point, you've got to be totally fearless and getting up in people's digital spaces and trying to prove your relevancy and stay on the radar so you don't get left behind.
As a business owner, I'm doing the exact same thing, so I can totally relate.
Exactly.
Shelby, are you seeing something similar with the Jolly users?
Yeah, definitely. I think it starts with really the most basic stuff. So it becomes more important in this world to actually be able to sell your services digitally. And it's really fascinating that a lot of freelancers and gig workers don't do this. They've all got a Venmo account, so in a sense they can get paid digitally. But some folks will set up a website. But really, most of the time you look at a website for a freelancer or a gig worker, you can't actually buy something from them on their website. And I think it's fascinating, right, that most e-commerce tools, your Shopify's of the world, have stayed really focused on selling physical goods versus services. And I mean, they all now say that you can use them for selling services, but they're really not built for that. And so that's where we started at Jolly, is basically an e-commerce tool for freelancers to sell services, and there's some bells and whistles, like selling flat fee packages or subscription packages. But it really is as simple as that. And so I think that's one category of tech that freelancers and gig workers are starting to realize that they need, is to just be hireable directly, not through a marketplace or something like that. So I think you have increasing adoption among freelancers and gig workers of these super basic, super important tools. And now, obviously, I would put things like, Zoom or Google Meet or whatever you want to use for video conferencing, these other basic things that you really have to network, communicate, and sell and transact digitally during the pandemic. And then you have some more sophisticated tools, I think, around reputation, what we call reputation portability. So for gig workers and freelancers, this is a really important, but I think kind of often overlooked issue. And the idea is that, okay, you're a gig worker, you do all these gigs on an app or on a marketplace like Upwork or Fiverr or something, Thumbtack. You do some work for individuals directly, just in person or remote, but they're paying you directly, not through a third party. And basically your reputation is not only fragmented and distributed across all these different places, but perhaps more importantly, it's stuck. It's actually stuck in some of these places. So if you drive on Uber, for example, you can't pull your Uber driver rating out of Uber and display it somewhere else on the web. Or if you've done some freelance design work on Upwork, you can't pull that reputation out of Upwork and use it in a different way. And this is a problem for a lot of different reasons. A long list of different reasons: building stability in your freelance career, increasing your earning potential, just a bunch of different things. And so that's actually part of what we built early at Jolly, is a tool that lets you pull your reputation from, I think, 9 or 10 different places to start, like Thumbtack and such, and then display that in one place that you control. So it's a start toward making your reputation portable, so you own it and you control it and you can use it however you want. And I think going back to the idea of kind of controlling your destiny as a freelancer, or being able to build stability in your freelance or independent career, I think reputation portability is a key part of that. So I think you're going to start seeing more and more solutions to that issue becoming available, and freelancers and gig workers taking advantage of it.
Great. Rachel, you had mentioned that you're seeing a shift in demographics of people who are using Favor, either as requesting services and grocery runs and that kind of thing, and also the different types of runners who are starting to join Favor. Are you seeing sort of an adaptation to new technology with the new demographics that are coming to the app?
Yeah, and I mean, as it's probably obvious, Favor is a little bit different because at Favor we are the ones building the technology and the platform that gig workers are using for their gig work. So we are building, our focus is on building the features that runners need to be successful. Examples of those during COVID have been having to build sort of a contactless ID check flow for alcohol orders so that runners can safely check IDs when they're delivering alcohol, and customers and runners don't have to be in contact with each other. Building sort of as like grocery orders have become more prominent, like, shopping and getting all the items for a grocery order is very different from going to a restaurant and ordering one or two things. And so we had to build in sort of checklist features within the Runner app to make those types of orders more efficient and more accurate. In general, for the technologies that runners use themselves to be successful and to differentiate themselves, This is going to sound really simple, but texting is something that the most successful runners use a lot to personalize their services and to differentiate themselves and make themselves less anonymous to customers. Obviously, that's not a new technology, but it remains probably the most important technology that runners can use to get better tips and better outcomes in terms of customer service. We've done analysis where runners who text customers get better tips, runners who send emojis get better tips, runners who send GIFs get better tips, runners who joke around with customers get better tips. And so we've built features into the app that allow runners to set up templates so that they can easily kind of introduce themselves, like by just like introduce themselves and sort of personalize themselves by like tapping a template that they've pre-created and sending it, so they don't have to do that repeatedly. And so a lot of what we have built into the app technology-wise are features that keep runners safe, features that that allow runners to do their jobs even as they've changed during COVID more efficiently, and features that help runners earn more by allowing them to stand out to customers.
Great, thank you. So let's dive a little bit deeper into the marketing piece for gig work. There are a ton of digital messages happening right now, and with gig work, it's really important to get your name out there and build your clientele, which is exactly what we're talking about right now. Shelby, I'm going to kick this to you first. What's the number one thing that you would recommend to gig workers to increase their marketing exposure? And then we've also got a similar question in the chat, which is, what are the most relevant gig platforms to have a presence?
Sure. So I think the number one thing is to just make it easy for people to hire you. And I know that sounds really basic, and it is really basic, but most freelancers, gig workers, independent workers don't do this. They don't give their network, their clients, their past clients, folks who they know, their second tier network, they don't make it easy for people to buy services from them. And so I think that's the first thing. And that starts with a place to sell services. It starts with being smart about what services you're offering, how you package them, how you price them, how you present them. But it's really, I think that's kind of the most basic thing. And then as you approach that as a freelancer, I think it's really important to remember the idea of stability and predictability. And so I know there was a question about what platforms are most important to have a presence. And I do a podcast where I interview successful freelancers, and I was doing an interview yesterday with a really successful medical writer, freelance writer. And she was really emphasizing that these platforms like freelancer.com, Upwork, Fiverr, it's super tempting to start there. If you're just starting out as a freelancer, or even if you're more experienced, to build up a base of business on these marketplaces. And it's really not a healthy way to launch an independent career, because you can get a stream of work from these apps and marketplaces. And that's really critical if you just have a simple earning goal that you need to meet. And don't get me wrong, I think apps and marketplaces are a foundationally important part of the gig economy. That's where a lot of people start. They think I need to list myself on these sites and get some jobs. And I think there are ways to build stability and predictability as a freelancer and a gig worker without having to rely on third-party marketplaces. And what I mean, for example, is, just one example is if you're a freelancer, regardless of what your skills are, it's likely that there's a way to offer a subscription package, a subscription service to your clients. So obvious examples are, if you're, a marketing consultant, you can create a monthly recurring kind of marketing coaching package. Or if you're a writer, you can do X amount of posts per month for somebody. There's a bunch of different ways that you can create subscription services. And that is a really amazing contributor to stability and predictability. It's not 100% guaranteed that client's going to cancel their subscription, but it's a lot more likely that they'll stick with it the next month than having to resell over and over and over. So I think that's the second part of it. Part one is just make it easy for people to hire you. And part two is, when you think about what you're going to offer so that folks can hire you, think about stability and predictability? How can you think creatively about your services to offer them in a recurring fashion and build up a base of recurring clients as a freelancer independent worker?
Thanks. There's a similar question or something in this vein that came up in the Q&A that I think is really interesting, especially when we're talking about solopreneurs and marketing, and that's how do you keep your work and personal social platforms separate, aka setting boundaries. And I know that that's something that people, kind of go back and forth with. So Celine, I'm interested in what maybe you're seeing your clients experience with that.
Yeah, I think for creatives, especially who their life and work are totally integrated, right? And so how do you toe that line and make sure that you're not oversharing or being inappropriate, or your political beliefs aren't inhibiting your sales, right? Because you're maybe sharing a little too much. When I talk with my clients and creatives, I'd like to point out the 80-20 rule. I think, yes, I want to see your dog. Yeah, a cute shot of your kid, but 80% of your content should be somewhat related to what you're doing and what you're presenting out there. So even if you're sipping coffee and reading a book, if it's inspiring pieces, if it's connected to your practice or your self-care, as long as it can be tied into who you are as a professional, then I think that's okay. But I think when things get a little spammy feeling, that's when you're really going to turn people off and people are going to unsubscribe. I really resonate with what Shelby was saying about falling back on these platforms that are pre-existing and coming in as a green into an industry. You're feeling like, okay, let me get in line. I feel like Etsy is a similar platform for people in the creative sector. If you're a metalsmith or you're making t-shirts or embroidery, it's really easy to be like, oh, well, I'll just get on Etsy. They have a shop that I can set up, and the fees are nominal, but the downfall is that you are putting yourself up against thousands, hundreds, millions of other makers that are doing very similar things for lower price points, for higher price points. And it's really, really difficult to stand out, even if you have good customer reviews and ratings, on a platform that's so dense like that. And it feels, for whatever reason, scarier to sign up for Squarespace and just set up a really beautiful, I'm not sponsored by Squarespace, but Wix or what have you. And just to put yourself out there, that the traffic that you're going to generate to your site is going to be so much more valuable than sending people to a large platform like Etsy. So I think it is, it's an easy loop to fall into, where you feel like you need to jump right into these things that are already set up and existing and have traffic, but that's no guarantee that you're going to be visible on that platform. I think that it's, I had other things to say here. In terms of marketing yourself and putting yourself out there, I think, being as genuine as you can and being really easy to work with. One thing that I like to say is be cool, be somebody that people want to work with. People always say, oh, it's who you know. And I don't agree with that at all. I think it's who knows you. Who have you worked for in the past? Who's in your network? Who has your name in their mouth when they hear of an opportunity that they think that you would be perfect for? That's how the magic happens in my experiences. It's not me, hustling and slanging business cards and paying for advertising. It's genuine connections that I've made and built over my career, that then when somebody hears, oh, well, I need, a DJ, I need a vinyl DJ. Oh, I know somebody who would be great for that because she was easy to work with. She played great music and, she's very professional. So it's very much a being personable and being easy to work with. I think that's a huge, huge part of it.
Absolutely. And then, of course, we can't gloss over the fact that while you're setting this stuff up, the whole point is to be successful, right? So we know that traditional career success is often defined with steady income security and job equanimity, but it's sometimes hard for gig workers to achieve that. I mean, we all know that as an entrepreneur, you can be feast or famine, right? In this environment, how are you seeing gig workers redefine what success means to them? And Rachel, I'll kick this to you first.
Sure. I think that, in talking to runners, and we do a lot of user research and a lot of roundtables with runners to get a sense of how they're feeling about running, what their pain points are, and to your point, like what success means to them and how they keep perspective on success. And a lot of them talk about not getting discouraged by the day-to-day results and seeing their metrics of success in the gig economy as more broad and holistic. So, running is similar probably to restaurant work in that there are times when you get bad tips. There are times when you have, customers that aren't great. But what you're trying to look at holistically is how did the entire day go, or how did the entire week go, and keep perspective that over the course of time, your earnings are what you would expect them to be. And so that's part of it. I think also a lot of runners really do define success and sort of self-identify as people who want to be runners and want to be gig economy workers, because what they tell us is they're considering sort of all facets of life when it comes to what it means to be doing well in the gig economy. And that means obviously work, and that means their earnings, but that also means like family, friends, hobbies, and ultimately the biggest reason runners tell us they use favor which is the ability to not work if you don't want to work if you do want to be able to probably influence your tips depending on how much you invest in service with customers or not, and to not have to adhere to a schedule. And so what we find with a lot of runners is that ultimately it is the flexibility that the platform affords that allows them to kind of define their lives as overall doing well, because favor and the platform that we provide is a slice that folds into how they want to arrange their lives. And I think it's also, each runner kind of talks about kind of getting real about what they want out of gig work by setting clear intentions of why they got into it, by asking if what they're doing is allowing for that, whether that's freedom from a 9-to-5 at a desk, whether that's extra money for school, whether that's wanting to remain flexible for other opportunities that may come up. And so I think that certainly what I've seen from talking to so many runners over the years is that that's different for everybody. And that ultimately it's that flexibility that helps them sort of define success and where favor fits into how they feel about their life as a whole.
Great. Shelby, are you seeing sort of a redefinition happening with the Jolly users in terms of traditional success measures?
I think, Rachel's right. And I don't think it's not just true for folks who want to do, be a runner with favor or do, driving on a rideshare platform. I think it's also true for, your freelancers, your, business consultants, marketing, whatever it is, designers. Very much you see this leaning into flexibility and freedom. And that means that freedom can mean different things to different freelancers. But I think at the end of the day, it's about choosing, when you work, who you work with, what exactly you do. So yeah, I think that's really, that's key. But I think what's key is a combination of that flexibility with stability. And I think like Favor's a great example of this, because if you take a runner, like they might say, yeah, I want to be a runner because I want flexibility and such. But what Favor is offering them is this combination of both that flexibility and stability, because they know with a high degree of certainty that when they're ready to do some work, they can do some work and it's going to be there and it's stable in that sense. And so I think this notion of traditional career success being defined by steady income security creates a little bit of a myth that you can't have income security as a gig worker or freelancer. And I really do think that's a myth. It might be a little harder to achieve, but I do think it's achievable for independent workers, freelancers, gig workers of any type. And I think the key is to think about income security and stability in the right way. So what are you doing to build up a repeat base of clients, whether they're committing to hire you on a monthly recurring basis or whether just the nature of your work is such that they come back over and over? How do you balance that more kind of bespoke service that you're providing to someone with something like Favor, or if you want to do that type of gig work, and knowing that there's a little bit of stability there too. So there are different ways to achieve stability. And I think as the gig economy has evolved, more people have tried being a freelancer or a gig worker. things are becoming more sophisticated. Gig workers are becoming more sophisticated. They're starting to understand that they can provide a mix of services that can be quite different, and create that type of security in a way that maybe in a certain way is more secure than a traditional 9-to-5 job, which you saw at the beginning of the pandemic with a lot of furloughs that never came back. A lot of folks losing their jobs, and so there's pluses and minuses to either career path. But I think gig workers are starting to understand that you can have this flexibility and freedom combined with income security or stability if you approach it and think about it the right way.
Yeah, and sort of going back to what Selena was saying at the beginning of the panel, one of the things that I've taught myself as a contractor, as a consultant in this, is how to record videos, how to podcast, how to edit from home, how to do that sort of thing. So, and I consider those to be measures of success, even though they aren't immediately translating into more clients. So Selena, I'm wondering, what you're seeing is, are people increasing their skill set as a way to also add to their value, with the skills that they bring?
I think inevitably that's survival at this point, right? If you're standing still and not adding to your tool belt, then you're going to get left behind. Unfortunately, that's the reality. I work with a lot of baby boomers, people who are very against learning new things and picking up, social media and these things that they've been able to sort of dance around up until now. And, it's finally putting their nose to the grind and really getting comfortable with being uncomfortable and not knowing things. Because I think it was easy before to just kind of, if I don't have to, then I don't want to. But yeah, absolutely. I think, a measure of success for us is seeing the community come and really enforce support in a way that maybe they weren't before, and being able to sustain their practice without having to, add jobs, or putting down their artistry and having to sacrifice that so that they can survive. So I think, there has been a lot of, especially locally, just to continue supporting local makers and artists and doing what you can, if you can. But in terms of learning new skills, I mean, I think that we're all in that point right now. If you have made it through this far and not had to be on a Zoom call, I don't know what you're doing for a living at this point.
I wonder if out of this, someone's going to come up with a great opportunity to be a gig worker, helping, sort of different generations figure out the tech and,
no
not
kidding.
time from down here. So thanks, you guys. I think those are great answers. We've definitely been seeing our community pull together and collaborate to move the needle on business endeavors and community issues. And I think that really this is where we talk about sort of, what the pandemic and what this huge shift has meant for all of us in Austin, not necessarily just like individual gig workers. How are you seeing collaboration between gig workers and maybe even mentorship opportunities to really help, like the rising tide lifts all boats, right? I mean, if one person can be successful and then help their counterparts, then obviously, we're not all as negatively impacted. So Rachel, I'd like to ask you to start off this one again.
Yeah, sure. So really, what Favor has always had is private Facebook groups in every market where where Favor has a presence that runners use as their community space to share their experiences, ask questions, exchange tips and tricks, and make connections. And so those groups were started by Favor, but we do not moderate them. And so they are just created by us. Employees of Favor go in there to understand customers or to understand runners and to understand pain points and understand what runners are saying, but they are entirely runner driven. There are similar communities that were runner created on like Reddit and other social spaces. And so what you see when you go in there is they are like, I was talking before about like, the runners who get tipped the highest share like GIFs and memes with customers. So they share like GIFs and memes that they send customers. They share examples of how to communicate with customers that have led to bigger tips. They share encouraging stories. They also share when they've had a rough day. They share when they've had tips that have been less than ideal. They kind of support each other and encourage each other. They ask each other, hey, is it busy over in this neighborhood? They kind of provide feedback to each other. And so these are kind of all community driven, all runner driven spaces that they go to encourage each other. And, you know, to the question of kind of how has that changed since the pandemic, is you've seen those conversations navigate to issues of safety, to kind of tips on, tips on delivering in this environment, as they were first navigating like contactless delivery, sharing tips with each other and making sure that the favors were actually like arrived and received by customers, and all of that was done in a safe way. And so those are really pretty organic spaces that have developed that see a lot of activity where runners help each other out.
Great, that's an excellent resource. Selena, what about you?
I think there's always been a really great camaraderie within the creative industry, both music and visual arts. We thankfully are not a town that gets really competitive with opportunity, and so we see a lot of altruism within the community, saying, "Hey, there's this great opportunity. You should get on top of it." And the organizers of our community, those like Frida Friday and the Boss Babes, the Melanated Market, these are people that are still persisting and gathering individual makers and saying, hey, here's a virtual market. Hey, here's an opportunity to continue to shop even though we can't do it in person. And the same goes for musicians. I mean, I feel like this is something that's really slowly coming back because it is not a necessary thing, although I think it's something that we're all very deprived of at this point. But I think businesses are saying, hey, musicians, we can take one or two of you outside on a patio, but we want to create these opportunities for you still. We want to make sure that we don't as this creative city. And so it's not necessarily people that are even in the creative industry, but can see themselves as an ally and can see themselves as a resource for these people to say, hey, I have this space, it's open, let's do a market that's distance and safe. Or, hey, I have a restaurant, there's a big patio. Let's continue to promote and support the weirdos in the city that are continuing to hone our personality. So, I think that there is a lot of just friendship that persists between all of the individuals in the creative community. And so people aren't afraid to ask questions and say, I'm struggling, or I'm lost on the social media thing. What can I be doing? And people are always there to kind of swoop in and say, okay, we'll try this, try that, or don't do that.
Great. Thanks, Selena. And Shelby?
I think Rachel and Selena covered some great stuff. I mean, obviously you're seeing events like this, like what we're doing right now, is I think pretty amazing that a group like this came together to even talk about this stuff. I think you're also seeing some really cool kind of grassroots stuff, like the Runner City Facebook group, which is kind of like a decentralized Facebook group of gig workers who will do stuff for you. You can post in the group and folks will reply. So it's kind of a more manual version of an on-demand app. And I'm pretty sure they're starting that group in a bunch of different cities. So I just, there's some really cool grassroots stuff where communities are coming together to facilitate, finding workers or finding work in a direct and kind of decentralized way. And I think that's really powerful. And I think that's going to be, those are some early signs of what I was talking about earlier about, what we call the trust economy, is this shift toward folks building trust directly with each other and being able to go back and re-engage with each other as opposed to, relying on a third party to do that. And that's really powerful. That's really powerful for the worker, because as we've been talking about, or, as I've been talking about this whole time, building up that stability for a worker is really critical. Maybe you find somebody, you do something, come back to you over and over for that same type of thing, that type of stability. So that's really that Facebook, great example of that. And then, I think you're seeing more folks who build software for freelancers, software companies who build tools for freelancers really lean into the community aspect. So that's what Rachel was talking about, Favor having created these social spaces for their runners to engage with each other and help each other. It's certainly what we do at Jolly, where it's not just, hey, come use our software to build to sell your services and build a stable freelance career. It's also like, look, we have this engaged community of freelancers helping each other learn and grow. And so those are just a few things that I think are really positive. Great.
Well, thanks, everybody. We're starting to wind down for time. So if anybody in the audience has one more question that they want to throw into the chat, otherwise I'm going to ask my own question, which is, and I'm going to ask each of you to answer. But if you could just share one win that you've had in the pandemic. I know that we focus a lot on what we've lost and what, tends to be sort of negative in the world, but one, professional win that you've been able to, really feel proud about and, share a little bit of positivity. And so, Selena, I'm gonna put you on the spot first.
I feel like mine is very timely right now. So the Big Medium's Austin Studio Tour is happening right now. We weren't able to participate in the in May is when usually the West Austin Studio Tour happens, and November is the East Austin Studio Tour. So they've consolidated the tours this year and to be completely virtual. And I was this close to just saying, you know what, we've done it for the last 4 years. It's not going to be the same. It's not even close to the same. We just won't do High Craft, our annual exhibition. And then I was, this is not going to be cast to the flames of 2020, yet another casualty. We're going to do this. We're going to figure it out. We're going to pull it off. And we were able to do it. And so there's beautiful art hanging in other areas of my house right now. I was able to partner up with a photographer to document it sort of an interior design way. And the exhibition's live. And for me, that's a passion project that's not necessarily related to my, profession, but it is something that I've taken a lot of pride in, and to be able to actually create some semblance of what that experience was for people and to get good feedback thus far after the first weekend was a win for sure.
Great. Thanks, Selena. And maybe, Selena, if you want to drop some of that information in the chat for everybody to be able to access that, that'd be great.
Absolutely.
Shelby, what about you?
Yeah, I think the biggest win professionally was what so far appears to be a successful pivot of our business, of our software, toward this tool that I've been talking a little bit about that helps freelancers, make it easy for folks to hire them, make it easy for folks to pay them, to buy their services, and make it a little bit easier to promote those services out to their network. It's been really gratifying to see the first 50 or 100 folks, sign up, create their pages on Jolly, create their service offerings, and go out and promote those to their network. And that's extremely fulfilling for me to see somebody creating their own opportunity in that way, and kind of planting the seeds of what will be a stable freelance career. So that's been a big win for us.
Great, thank you. And Rachel, you want to close us out?
Sure. I would say that I think many people know that Favor is run by HEB. And when the first wave of the pandemic hit, HEB was being asked to expand store shopping hours to kind of early morning hours only for seniors to shop. But they were reluctant to do that because the CDC guidelines were actually recommending that seniors not go out at all, just because of the risks, and especially kind of a very new understanding of the virus. And so HEB was really looking for a way to get groceries quickly to seniors without having to ask seniors to come into stores, even if it was just a senior dedicated hour. And so probably one of the most rewarding things that we did at Favor this year is we really kind of threw out our product roadmap that we had at the beginning of the year, and we just started sort of responding in real time to these types of community needs. And when we started looking into the demographic of seniors, the challenge of delivering to them was that many seniors don't have smartphones, so they couldn't download the Favor app or the HEB app, may not have computers, certainly aren't familiar with ordering groceries online. And so what they were really familiar with and what they're comfortable with is landlines and ordering over the phone. And that is certainly not like the target customer that Favor is going for with with a smartphone app. And so what we put together was a hotline for seniors to call and get free delivery on any grocery orders from HEB. And what we needed somebody to staff that. So we took volunteers from within Favor and from within HEB to staff these phone lines. And even in staffing the phone lines, we realized that a lot of people from HEB didn't, have experience like taking customer phone calls or fulfilling orders. So what we did on our product team was we built an internal tool that had like a script built in for answering these phone calls and actually placing the details of the order and fulfilling it for the customer, and then runners pick them up. And so that was just kind of like a product, a feature, an implementation that would have never, ever occurred to us to be working on at Favor, because that's just like, we make a mobile app that relatively tech savvy people can download on a smartphone to place orders. And so the idea of, I never would have thought on January 1st that I'd be like figuring out how to create an internal tool for volunteers so that they could take orders for seniors who called us from a landline. But it was really rewarding, and kind of tying this back to, our runners, who are really the lifeblood. Like, without runners, there is no Favor, there is no product, there is no service. Looking in those Facebook groups, I remember we were wondering, like, will runners want to fulfill these favors? Because these are going to be a little more complicated. They're going to have to shop these orders in ways that are more complex than just a typical restaurant order. And seeing what runners started posting in the Facebook groups were like handwritten notes from seniors thanking them. And like, just like these really heartwarming stories of people that were so grateful to get grocery delivery and to have like a hotline to call. And so that was, I think, a rewarding thing on our end to build. And it was a rewarding thing on the runner side for us to watch as runners started fulfilling these and enjoying it and feeling rewarded by it.
Rachel, that's so heartwarming. Thank you so much for sharing that. Yeah. So thank you all so much again. I think this has been really a robust and rich conversation, and I really appreciate your time and willingness to join our panel today. So thank you very much. And now we are going to transition to our roundtable discussions. Attendees, each of our panelists will also be hosting a table in a minute, so feel free to move to their table and ask any specific questions you might have. Once we end presentation mode, you can move from table to table simply by double-clicking on the table that you'd like to move to. We will also be joined by a few additional experts as table hosts. I'll be hosting Biz Dev. I don't know if I'm an expert, but I'm definitely hosting the table. Billy Moyer, who is founder and president of SOS Leadership, will be hosting the topic of identifying and monetizing skills. Reese Cisneros, who is the founder and event strategist of Strategies by Reese, will be talking about business marketing. We'll also have some tables for general networking if you want to meet some new people, just like in the good old person days. And this platform will be open for roundtable discussions until 12:15. I don't know if Mel wants to make an announcement if we're going to make it past that, but definitely at least till 12:15. So thank you again for joining us for today's Exploring Entrepreneurship program, and we will see you at the tables.